No, it wasn't tough. It was actually easy, but in Detroit nothing is easy. The level of concentration is so high, you know, one slip and you're gone. So you have to be so careful all the time. Car-wise, yeah, the problems I expected and nothing else.
Let's see your hands here.
Keke Rosberg, a Formula One champion, is a name that stands out in the racing world. His career was full of victories, but behind his success, Rosberg has some big regrets. He often thinks about the chances he missed and the choices he made that could have made his career even better. Keke Rosberg is a Finnish former racing driver who made history by winning the 1982 Formula One World Championship. He was the first Finnish driver to achieve this incredible feat, marking a major milestone in the sport. Despite this huge success and his impressive career, Rosberg has some significant regrets. Looking back, he often thinks about the moments he wishes he could have done differently and the opportunities he might have missed. But before we get into the details, make sure to subscribe. Rosberg has openly shared one of his biggest regrets: how he left the Williams team. He said that if he had stayed with Williams longer, he might have retired from racing even sooner. The main issue was his tough working relationship with some of the team members, especially with Patrick Head, who took on a more powerful role after Frank Williams' accident. This strained dynamic made it hard for Rosberg to work effectively. Eventually, this situation pushed him to leave Williams and join McLaren in 1986. Rosberg's departure was heavily influenced by these difficulties, and he often reflects on how different things might have been if the team's situation had been better. From the very start, his career seemed like pure perfection.
And the engineer was Patrick Head apparently back then, which as such would have been a combination which I would have loved to experience. Patrick Head and my dad working together. Cool to what he achieved at the time with that awesome lap around here, and that it stood for so long. It was a special achievement.
Rosberg had a rather unusual start to his Formula One career. He was already 29 when he made his debut, having raced in several other series like Formula V, Formula Super V, Can-Am, Formula Atlantic, Formula Pacific and Formula 2 before making it to Formula One. He had been supported by Fred Oppert, an American patron. His first Formula One drive came with the Theodore team during the 1978 season. Rosberg quickly made an impression with an outstanding performance in just his second race with Theodore at the BRDC International Trophy at Silverstone, winning in a heavy downpour that caught many top drivers off guard. However, he struggled to qualify for subsequent races and moved to the ATS team for 3 races after Theodore's unreliable car design was scrapped. When Theodore got a new chassis from the Wolf Formula One team, Rosberg returned. But those cars were also uncompetitive, leading him back to ATS for the rest of the season. Rosberg found a better opportunity with the Wolf team midway through 1979. Unfortunately, Wolf struggled financially and Rosberg had trouble finishing races. When Wolf left Formula One, Rosberg joined Fittipaldi Automotive, which had taken over the remains of Wolf's team. He had some success, scoring points and even getting a podium at the season opener in Buenos Aires. However, the Fittipaldi car was not competitive, and in 1981, Rosberg failed to score any points. Despite this, Williams was interested in him because of Alan Jones's retirement, which left a seat open for the 1982 season. Then came the dramatic end of his era with Williams. With a competitive car from Williams, Rosberg had a fantastic year. He consistently scored points and won his first race at the Swiss Grand Prix in Dijon-Prenois. That year, no driver won more than 2 races, and despite Ferrari's troubles and the unreliable turbocharged cars of Brabham and Renault, Rosberg's consistency earned him the Drivers' Championship. He managed to win the title with a narrow 5-point lead over Didier Pironi, who had missed several races due to injuries. Rosberg's win was also the last championship for the old Cosworth DFV engine. After his championship season, Rosberg faced challenges with uncompetitive chassis and the unreliable Honda turbo engine. For 1983, he used the reliable Ford DFY V8 but soon faced stiff competition from the turbocharged engines of Ferrari, Renault and BMW. Although he managed to achieve some successes, including a win at the Race of Champions and Monaco, the lack of a competitive turbo engine held him back. In 1984, Rosberg's season was hindered by issues with the FWW-09B chassis, but he still managed to win the Dallas Grand Prix and finished 8th in the championship. In November 1984, Rosberg travelled to Australia for the non-championship Australian Grand Prix at Calder Park Raceway. Despite qualifying well and having a memorable race with fellow drivers, he finished second behind Roberto Moreno. The 1985 season saw improvements for both Rosberg and Williams. With a new teammate, Nigel Mansell, and the all-carbon fibre FDIW-10 chassis, Rosberg started to shine again. He won the Detroit Grand Prix and set a record for the fastest lap at Silverstone, a record that stood until 2002. His last Grand Prix win came at the 1985 Australian Grand Prix on the new Adelaide Street Circuit, which also marked his final race for Williams. Rosberg handed the winner's trophy to his race engineer, Frank Durney. Just as the Honda engine began to show its potential, Rosberg decided to leave Williams at the end of 1985 and signed with McLaren, the reigning champions. Williams and Honda went on to dominate the 1986 and 1987 seasons, but Rosberg's decision marked the end of an era with Williams. He then made a big move to McLaren. When Rosberg moved to McLaren for the 1986 season, it seemed like a brilliant decision. McLaren had dominated Formula One for the previous 2 years, especially in 1984. However, by 1986, the McLaren wasn't as powerful as its competitors. Rosberg struggled with the car, which was designed for the smoother driving style of Alain Prost and Niki Lauda. Rosberg's style was more aggressive, and it wasn't until McLaren's designer, John Barnard, announced he was leaving for Ferrari that Rosberg was allowed to adjust the car to better suit his driving. Ironically, this change led to Rosberg's only pole position of the season in Germany. Adding to the difficulties, Rosberg was deeply shaken by the death of his close friend, Elio De Angelis, who had a fatal crash while testing a Brabham in France. This tragedy weighed heavily on him, and by the end of the season, Rosberg decided to retire, later admitting that he might have stepped away from racing too soon. In his final race, the 1986 Australian Grand Prix, Rosberg showed his skill by leading for much of the race. Unfortunately, a rear tyre failure on lap 62 forced him to pull over, thinking the problem was engine-related. He later realised he only needed to change the tyre to continue, but by then, his race was over. Rosberg had planned to help Alain Prost win the championship, even though he had already dropped out of the title race himself. Prost did win the race and the title, while Nelson Piquet, his replacement at Williams, also faced a dramatic end to his race. Rosberg had decided back in mid-1984 that he would race for just 2 more years. But he only announced his retirement publicly in 1986. Looking back, he had no regrets about leaving Williams and joining McLaren, even though the Honda engine was just starting to show its potential, while the McLaren's tag engine was aging. In an interview after announcing his retirement, Rosberg expressed relief that he left Williams when he did. He mentioned that, had he stayed, he might have quit racing early in 1986 due to a difficult working relationship with someone at Williams. Though he didn't name names, it was widely believed that he had conflicts with Patrick Head, the team's head designer who took charge while Frank Williams was recovering from a serious accident. After retiring from racing, Rosberg went on to manage several drivers, including his fellow Finns JJ Lehto and Mika Häkkinen, who would later become a world champion. Until 2008, he also managed his son, Nico Rosberg, who started his Formula One career with Williams F1 in 2006. In a memorable moment in 2013, both Keke and Nico became the first father and son to win the Monaco Grand Prix, with a 30-year gap between their victories. Then, in 2016, they achieved another milestone by becoming the second father-son pair to win Formula One World Championships, following Graham Hill and Damon Hill, who won the titles in 1962, 1968 and 1996. That is it for this one, but if you happen to like F1 Legends, make sure to check out our latest videos on our channel F1 Icons. I'm sure you will love it.